I was 17 years old the first time I watched a woman disappear. Not the way you're thinking. She didn't die. She didn't run away in the middle of the night. She was still there, sitting at the same table, sleeping in the same bed, walking the same floors she had walked for 23 years. But she was gone, and nobody talked about it. Nobody named it. Because in the community I grew up in, what happened to her didn't have a name. It just was. My name is Sarah. I left the Amish community when I was 22 years old. And today I want to talk about something that I have never fully spoken out loud before. Not on camera, not like this. Because I think people on the outside, they look at Amish life and they see the simplicity. The horses, the quilts, the fresh bread, and they think it's peaceful. And in some ways it was. But there is something that happens to Amish women, specifically Amish wives, that most people never see. And it started becoming real to me through watching what happened to my friend Lavina. Lavina was the kind of woman you noticed the moment she walked into a room. She had this laugh, this big, full, warm laugh that seemed too large for the kind of world we lived in. She was married at 19 to a man named Elam. He was tall, respected in the community, a good farmer by all visible accounts. And for the first few years, things looked fine. She had babies, she kept the house, she preserved food and sewed clothing and did everything that was expected. But somewhere around the time her fourth child was born, something shifted. And by the time I was old enough to notice, I could see that Lavina was tired, in a way that sleep didn't fix. Here is the thing that people don't understand about Amish marriage. It is not like a modern marriage where you can negotiate your roles or redefine your partnership over time. In the old order Amish tradition, which is where I come from, marriage is a covenant under God and under the ordnung, which is the set of rules that govern how the community lives. And within that covenant, the husband is the head of the household, full stop. That is not a soft suggestion. That is the structure that everything else is built on. Now I want to be fair here, because not every Amish man abuses this structure. I know men from my community who were genuinely kind to their wives, who consulted them, who valued them, but the structure itself creates a kind of vulnerability for women that most people on the outside never think about. Because when a husband decides, for whatever reason, that his wife is no longer useful, there is no safety net, there is no HR department, there is no lawyer, there is no law in the community that protects her. What do I mean by no longer useful? That sounds harsh, I know, but let me explain how this actually shows up in real life. Because it isn't always dramatic, it isn't always a man standing up and declaring something. It is quieter than that, and that is what makes it so devastating. It can start with something as simple as a husband withdrawing. He stops talking to his wife about things that matter. He stops asking her opinion. He starts making all the decisions, large and small, without her. He stops looking at her the way he used to, and in a community where a woman's worth is almost entirely tied to her role as wife and mother, that withdrawal communicates something very specific. It says, "You are here, but you do not matter." Lovina told me once, we were maybe 20 years old at the time, that Elam had started making decisions about the farm without telling her anything. They used to talk in the evenings. She said those conversations just stopped one day. No fight, no explanation. They just stopped, and she didn't know what she had done wrong. She spent months trying to figure out what she had done wrong. That is the first thing that happens. The woman turns the blame inward, because she has been raised her entire life in a system that tells her that her husband's authority is God-given, and that her job is to support it. So when things go wrong in the marriage, the natural conclusion she reaches is that she has failed in her role. She wasn't submissive enough. She wasn't patient enough. She wasn't a good enough wife. This is not me saying Amish women are weak. They are some of the strongest women I have ever known. But strength doesn't protect you from a system that is designed to make you question yourself. Now here is where it gets more complicated, and this is what I really want people to understand. In the Amish community, divorce is essentially not an option. It is not just frowned upon or discouraged. It is forbidden. The church will not recognize a divorce. A person who divorces and remarries is subject to the maidang, which is the shunning. That means the community stops speaking to you. Your family stops speaking to you. Your children, depending on their age, may be pressured to cut contact with you. Everything you have ever known is severed. So what happens when a wife finds herself in a marriage where she is being treated as invisible? She cannot leave without losing everything. Her children, her parents, her siblings, her neighbors, her entire world, and she cannot stay and fight because the tools that women in the outside world use to fight, legal protection, financial independence, community support, she doesn't have access to any of them. Amish women typically do not have personal bank accounts. They do not have credit cards. Many of them have never held a job outside the home. Their names are often not on property or financial documents. And because the Amish community exists largely outside of certain legal systems, and because they handle disputes internally, there is often no outside authority to appeal to. When Lavina's marriage was at its worst, she told me she had tried to speak to the bishop. Now the bishop is the highest spiritual authority in an Amish congregation. He is the one who settles disputes, who interprets the ordnung, who has the final word on community matters. Lavina went to him, quietly, privately, because she was scared of what Elam would do if he found out she had said anything. She told the bishop that she felt like she was disappearing in her own home, that her husband treated her like she was furniture, that she was frightened. The bishop told her to pray. He told her to be more patient. He told her that her husband carried the burden of headship and that she should support him better. He prayed with her and sent her home. That is not a story unique to Lavina. That is a pattern, and I am not saying every bishop responds that way, but the structure of the community means there is almost never an outcome, where the woman is believed over the man, where she is protected, where her suffering is taken as seriously as the preservation of the marriage. After that meeting with the bishop, Lavina stopped talking to me about what was happening at home. She went quiet for about 2 years, and when I saw her during that time, she had changed. The laugh was still there sometimes, but it was smaller. It didn't fill the room anymore. She had learned to make herself smaller too. There is a term that trauma therapists use, called learned helplessness. It describes what happens to a person when they try repeatedly to change their situation, and nothing works. Eventually the brain stops trying, not because the person is weak, but because the brain is trying to protect them from the pain of repeated failure. And I believe this is what happens to many Amish women who find themselves trapped in marriages where they are invisible or unwanted. The cruel thing about learned helplessness in this context is that from the outside it looks like contentment, it looks like acceptance, it looks like the peaceful, simple life that outsiders romanticize. The woman is quiet, she keeps the house, she doesn't complain, she goes to church and sits in the women's section and doesn't make trouble. And people look at her and think, see, she is fine, she has chosen this life, she didn't choose helplessness, she arrived there, one closed door at a time. Now I want to be specific about what the practical reality looks like when a husband decides his wife is no longer useful to him, because I think it's important to be concrete. The first thing that often happens is economic control becomes tighter. Any money that comes into the household goes through the husband. If the wife has been selling baked goods or quilts or eggs, which is one of the few ways Amish women can generate small amounts of independent income, the husband can simply tell her to stop, or he can take control of where that money goes. She has no legal recourse, because she has no independent financial standing. The second thing that happens is social isolation, and this is subtle, but devastating. An Amish woman's social world is her community. It's the quilting circles, the visiting between neighbors, the church fellowship. A husband who wants to isolate his wife doesn't have to lock her in the house. He just has to make it difficult. He doesn't hitch the horse when she wants to visit someone. He expresses displeasure when she spends time with certain women. He makes her feel guilty for time not spent on household tasks. Slowly, her world shrinks. The third thing is what I would call theological weaponization, and this one is the most insidious, because it attacks a woman's most foundational sense of self. In a deeply religious community, your faith is not separate from your daily life. It is your daily life. When a husband tells his wife repeatedly that her unhappiness is a spiritual failing, that her doubts are a sign of pride, that her pain is something God is using to humble her, she starts to believe it, not because she is stupid, but because this is the framework she was given from birth to understand her own life. Lavina told me once that she had started to believe that she deserved what was happening, that God was teaching her something. And the thing about that kind of thinking is that it doesn't just keep her in the marriage, it keeps her from even fully recognizing that what is happening to her is wrong. The fourth thing I want to talk about is children, because this is where it gets truly agonizing. Amish mothers are deeply, completely devoted to their children. And in a community where the church and the husband control what happens to the family, a woman who considers leaving has to face the real possibility of losing her children. Not just in the sense of them staying behind geographically, though that happens, but in the sense that if she leaves the community, she will be shunned, and her children, who remain in the community, will be taught to treat her as if she does not exist. Lavina stayed for her children. She told me that, not in those exact words, but I understood it. She had 5 of them by the time I left, and she had calculated, In that quiet internal way that women in impossible situations calculate things, that staying invisible was better than leaving, and becoming non-existent to the people she loved most. I want to stop here for a second, because I know some people watching this are from Amish backgrounds, or have family in Amish communities, and I want to be careful. I am not saying that every Amish marriage is like this. I am not saying every Amish man is cruel. I am not saying the community is purely a place of suffering. There are genuine warmth and genuine faith and genuine love in those communities, and I hold that too. What I am saying is that the structural conditions, the lack of financial independence for women, the prohibition on divorce, the internal resolution of disputes, the theological framework that prioritizes wifely submission, these conditions create a situation where abuse of power within a marriage is extraordinarily easy to commit and extraordinarily difficult to escape. And that is true. Regardless of whether the individual man intends harm or not. I left when I was 22. It was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, and I had been preparing for it internally for years, slowly building up the courage, quietly learning things about the outside world, making a plan. Even with preparation, leaving nearly broke me. The shunning was immediate. My mother stopped writing to me within a month. 2 of my sisters followed. The silence from people who had known me my whole life was a physical thing. It had weight, and I had prepared. I had somewhere to go. I had someone on the outside who helped me. Most women who want to leave don't have any of that. Lavina did not leave. Last I heard, and I get small bits of information through people who are still in contact with the community. She is still there. Her children are mostly grown now. Elam is still respected in the community. And Lavina, from what I understand, still keeps the house, still goes to church, still preserves her food and sews her clothes, still makes herself smaller. I think about her all the time. I think about the laugh that used to fill rooms. I think about the girl she was before she married at 19, before she learned that her job was to disappear gracefully. There are organizations that help women who want to leave the Amish community. Amish and Mennonite Aid, Amish Heritage Foundation. There are people doing real work to provide the kind of safety net that these women cannot find inside the community. If you know someone in this situation, or if you are in this situation yourself, those resources exist. You are not alone, even if everything around you is telling you that you are. What I want people to take away from this is not a simple story about good and evil. It is not a story about Amish people being bad and outsiders being good. It is a story about what happens when systems are built in ways that make certain people structurally vulnerable, and how that vulnerability can be exploited, even in communities that believe themselves to be living righteously. Lavina was not weak. She was caught in something that was designed to hold her, and the fact that it looked peaceful from the outside doesn't mean it wasn't a cage. Some cages are built out of silence, and theology, and love for your children, and the fear of losing everything you have ever known. They don't need bars. They don't need locks. They just need a woman who has been taught her whole life that her pain is a spiritual assignment, and her disappearance is obedience. I got out. I am still grieving things I lost, and probably will be for the rest of my life. But I am here. I am talking, and if my voice finds even one woman who needed to hear that her life has value, beyond her usefulness to someone else, then this was worth it. Thank you for watching.